Ladies and gentlemen, Madam President of the Republic of Slovenia, Ms. Nataša Pirc-Musar. Madam President of the Republic of Slovenia, Ms. Nataša Pirc-Musar, Her Excellency, the British Ambassador, Ms. Tiffany Sadler, Honorary Chairman of the Chapter Zero Slovenia, Mr. Miha Košak, distinguished founding members and members of the working group of Chapter Zero Slovenia. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the launch event of Chapter Zero Slovenia. Climate change is one of the defining challenges of our lifetime, and it's affecting every corner of the globe, including our little Slovenia. We are witnessing more frequent and severe weather events, rising sea levels, changing ecosystems, which pose a threat to entire planets and global and also local economies. It is my pleasure to say that the British-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce, Slovenian Directors Association, and Deloitte Slovenia have joined forces to establish this initiative with the support of the President of the Republic, Nataša Pirc-Musar, as honorary patron of Chapter Zero Slovenia. We're honored to have such great partners and esteemed panelists today, speakers joining us. They will share their insights and experiences on climate governance, climate change in Slovenia and worldwide, and how to bring climate change in boardrooms. We hope that this event will spark meaningful discussions, inspire actions towards a more sustainable future. Our sincere gratitude goes also to our sponsors who made this event today possible. NLB, Triglav, BTC, Go Green, Delo, thank you all for being here, and let's get started. Our first speaker today is the Honorary Chairman of Chapter Zero Slovenia, Mr. Miha Košak. As one of the founding members of Chapter Zero Slovenia, he played a pivotal role in establishing this initiative. He recognized the urgency to address climate change in boardrooms all over the place and the critical role that supervisory and management boards can play in driving sustainable business practices. Let's hear from Mr. Košak, his vision behind Chapter Zero Slovenia. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Spoštovana predsednica Republike Slovenije, Her Excellency the British Ambassador, our keynote speaker Karina Litvak, distinguished roundtable participants, here you are, Chapter Zero esteemed colleagues, dame in gospodje, dober dan. Hvala Jure za predstavitev. Vsem se vnaprej upravičujem, ker bom nadaljeval v angleščini in ne v našem materinnem jeziku. To društvo je sicer slovensko, smo pa tudi svetovna organizacija s problemi, ki so seveda globalni. In ker so med nami gosti iz inozemstva, Slovenci smo pa znani poligloti, sem prepričan, da angleščina ni za nikogar problem. So once again, good morning. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of Chapter Zero Slovenia. We are so honored to have with us today the President of Slovenia, as well as the British Ambassador, and many other distinguished speakers and guests from across the business and political communities here in our homeland. I am humbled to be standing here today to celebrate the establishment of this local chapter of the global network of non-executive directors who are committed to advancing the role of the board in addressing climate change and the path to net zero. If you'd be so kind and indulge me for a brief moment, let me give you a bit of background on how we got here. In August 2021, I reached out to Karina Litvak with the idea to set up Chapter Zero Slovenia. I'd recently joined Chapter Zero in the UK, where one of my former mentors became a supporting chair of the organization, whilst another good friend of mine became chair of Chapter Zero Poland. Both of them highly capable non-executive directors whom I very much admire. Chapter Zero was at that time growing at a very fast pace. Recall also that we had the pandemic, etc. and the team, including Karina, had their hands full with requests. But we managed at least to lodge the idea of Chapter Zero Slovenia with the Climate Governance Initiative. And I managed to dodge the issue, well, maybe you should join Chapter Zero Poland, etc. I said, no, we need to have our own. I was fortunate that Karina introduced me to an excellent Deloitte UK and World Economic Forum professional, Natasha Fortuyn, who was immense help in those latter months of 2021 in clearly outlining the best approach of how to create a roadmap for the launch of Chapter Zero Slovenia. So, with all this information gathered, I immediately turned to the person who I knew would be up for the challenge, and that is Barbara Oraniak here, a true professional whom I've been fortunate enough to work with the past 6 years at the British-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce. As I had hoped, she saw the importance of this endeavor, and together, slowly but surely, we started the process in earnest. The result of all that is the team you will meet today in this front row, and of course, all of you who are now members. It goes without saying that the management board of Chapter Slovenia, of Barbara Oraniak, Irena Prijovic, who is not unfortunately with us today, and Barbara Žibert-Kralj, and the respective support of the Chamber of Commerce, the Združenje nadzornikov Slovenije, and Deloitte Slovenia is greatly appreciated. A special thanks goes to Mojca Markizetti from Deloitte Slovenia for her immense help, and to Gorazd Podbevšek for his and the Slovene Directors Association's support. Our Chapter Zero Slovenia working group deserves a profound thanks, and this is a group led by Mojca and includes Professor Adriana Rejc-Bukovec of the University of Ljubljana, Alenka Recel-Mercina from NLB, Ana Struna Bregar, the Sustainable Business Network, Ladea Godina-Košir from Circular Change, Nina Kelemen from Triglav Insurance, and last but not least, Tina Kubilšek from the Ministry of Environment. I'd like to thank the legal support that we received from Jan Sibinčič from the law firm Sibinčič, Križanec and Novak. And finally, our Chamber of Commerce and Chapter Zero team of Špela Drobnič and Tara Pleško, along with Rada Sibila from the Združenje nadzornikov Slovenia, are all to be highly praised for their time, dedication and support. People have given their free time, and that I really, really appreciate. The icing on the so-called proverbial cake are our patrons, starting with the president herself. Hvala lepa še enkrat, gospa predsednica. What an honor we have. As well as Dr. Lučka Kajfež-Bogataj, a pioneer in researching the impact of climate change, professor at the Biotech Faculty in Ljubljana, and a member of the United Nations Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change. Dr. Janez Potočnik, former EU Commissioner for the Environment, and Ambassador Tiffany Sadler. My thanks to you as well. Now, I hope you all noticed that we have a very healthy diversity issue. That my dear chair of the Združenje nadzornikov Slovenia would point out immediately. But isn't it nice to have a diversity issue the other way? Finally. I thought long and hard about how to make my opening remarks after I welcomed you all, thanked you, the team, and then went down a short memory lane of how this initiative started. I vowed not to be a preacher from the pulpit. I know it looks like that, but I vowed not to be that. I said to myself, if you are here, you already know how critical the concern about reaching net zero is. And you are also ready to use your leadership skills to make this essential change a priority and a clear necessity. Those that we need to convince are, though, numerous, and they are absent from here today. But we can hope that in this common effort, we will start reaching many more leaders and corporates and hope to make a real difference in the years to come. Now, let me turn to the matter at hand. All of us here know that our planet is at a critical juncture, with the urgent need to address climate change becoming increasingly apparent on a daily basis. As individuals, businesses, and governments, we all have a responsibility to take action towards achieving a net zero economy. And this is where the role of the supervisory and management boards becomes crucial. As guardians of corporate governance, we play a vital role in driving this change and ensuring that businesses are taking action to reduce their carbon footprint. We have a unique perspective that allows us to see the big picture, identify the risks and the opportunities, and make informed decisions that will benefit both our respective businesses, but more crucially, the environment, and therefore Slovenia as a whole. The establishment of Chapter Zero Slovenia is a significant step towards advancing the role of supervisory and management boards in addressing climate change. By bringing together a network of like-minded individuals who are committed to tackling this critical issue, this chapter will play a pivotal role in driving change and promoting best practices across Slovenia and I hope eventually the region. This chapter will also serve as a valuable resource for businesses and policymakers, providing insights into the role of supervisory and management boards in driving change towards a net zero economy. By sharing best practices and lessons learned, this chapter will help raise awareness and promote greater understanding of the critical role that we all play in tackling climate change. This establishment of this chapter, in my view, is a testament to the growing awareness of the urgent need to address climate change and the role that we can play in that change. I commend my fellow co-founders, patrons, colleagues and members of Chapter Zero Slovenia for their vision and commitment to promoting sustainability and advancing the role of supervisory and management boards in addressing climate change. In conclusion, I'm very grateful for everyone and everyone's participation. The road starts now. We have a lot to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Košak, for this inspiring opening remarks. Thank you very much. It is my great honor to introduce our next distinguished speaker, guest, President of the Republic of Slovenia, Nataša Pirc-Musar. As honorary patron of Chapter Zero Slovenia, she has provided invaluable support to the initiative, lending her voice and her influence to promote goals and objectives of Chapter Zero Slovenia. Please join me in welcoming the President of the Republic.
Eno lepo dobro jutro vsem skupaj. Good morning to everyone. As a president, of course, I have to speak in Slovene, but I can say a couple of words in English. I'm really honored to be here. 100 days of my presidency just passed by like that quickly. And I visited many countries around the globe already. I have talked to 30 presidents and prime ministers of the states around the world. And in basically all of the conversations that I had, climate change was a key point for a discussion. When I was in Doha, at the UN conference of the least developed countries, there was a lot of debate about climate change. And African countries explained to me that Africa is a climate neutral continent, but they are in heavy pain because all the consequences that the industrialized countries are doing to our planet, Africa is facing them. Droughts, floods, it's crazy. Least developed countries represent 25% of all the countries in the world, but they produce only 4% of, bad emissions. So, as you said, Mr. Košak, the clock is ticking. It has started clicking a long time ago, so we have to do something. This is why I have decided to be a patron of this Chapter Zero in Slovenia. It is honestly and really my honor. And now I will continue in Slovenian. Spoštovana veleposlanica Združenega kraljestva, my dear friend Tiffany, spoštovani častni predsednik Chapter Zero Slovenia, spoštovani vsi, ki ste sodelovali pri ustanovitvi pobude v Sloveniji in ste seveda del njene ekipe, spoštovana Karina Litvak, predsednica Climate Governance Initiative, visoki gostje, dame in gospodje. Ko je Evropska komisija leta 2020 predstavila Evropski zeleni dogovor, je bil cilj jasen. Do leta 2050 bodo države članice izpolnile vse cilje Pariškega podnebnega sporazuma, Evropska unija pa bo postala ogljično nevtralna celina. To bo evropski trenutek pristanka na Luni, je tedaj napovedala predsednica Evropske komisije Ursula von der Leyen. Če so bile naše oči in ambicije leta 1969 usmerjene v vesolje, se danes osredotočamo na izzive, ki so enako daljnosežni kot pristanek na Luni, vendar so v marsičem še bolj odločilni za nas in za naš planet. To sta prilagajanje na podnebne spremembe in seveda zmanjševanje izpustov toplogrednih plinov. Ob vseh drugih izzivih, s katerimi se ljudje soočamo, kot sta bila denimo pandemija COVID-19 ali sedaj vojna v Ukrajini, moramo prilagajanje na podnebne spremembe in cilje Pariškega podnebnega sporazuma ohraniti na vrhu mednarodne politične, gospodarske in seveda tudi družbene agende. S tem je pravzaprav povezano vse, saj gre za naša skupna prizadevanja za obstoj in ohranitev planeta, edinega, ki ga imamo. Zato sem z navdušenjem sprejela častno pokroviteljstvo nad pobudo Chapter Zero Slovenia. Ob tej priložnosti bi se želela tudi jaz zahvaliti Britansko-slovenski gospodarski zbornici, Združenju nadzornikov Slovenije in Deloitte Slovenija, da ste se lotili tega pomembnega projekta. Verjamem, da v Sloveniji in našemu poslovnemu okolju prinaša zgled odgovornega voditeljstva za prihodnost, v katerem bodo podjetja zeleni prehod sprejela kot priložnost. To je za naše poslovno okolje še toliko bolj pomembno, saj poročilo o produktivnosti za leto 2022 opozarja, da Slovenija po produktivnosti sicer postopno napreduje, a se v smislu prehoda v inovacijsko podprto rast in krožno gospodarstvo razvija prepočasi, s preveč površinskimi procesi modernizacije in preobrazbe. Poročilo pri tem izpostavlja razmeroma počasno zmanjševanje razvojnega zaostanka za povprečjem Evropske unije in ohranjanje velike razvojne vrzeli za vodilnimi državami inovatorkami, pa tudi upadanje prednosti pred višegrajsko skupino. Pogosto slišim, da zeleni prehod pravzaprav predstavlja nešteto ovir pri delovanju in poslovanju, včasih celo to, da onemogoča napredek. Te trditve sicer skušam razumeti, vendar sama zeleni prehod vidim predvsem kot priložnost, ki je ne smemo zamuditi. Vidim ga kot strategijo za upravljanje tveganj ob maksimalnem izkoriščanju novih priložnosti, ki jih ponuja. Gospodarstvo ima pri tem izjemno pomembno vlogo, morda celo najpomembnejšo. Po več desetletjih intenzivne gospodarske rasti in, če mi dovolite ta izraz, hiperkapitalizma, smo se na nekaterih področjih znašli pred eksistencialnem vprašanju, kaj več lahko dosežemo in kam dlje še sploh lahko gremo. Odgovor je preprost, ne prav daleč oziroma ne tako daleč, kot bi si želeli, če ne bomo znali spremeniti nekaterih delovanj, ki že dlje časa potrebujejo korenite reforme. Ravno zato so cilji Pariškega podnebnega sporazuma tako pomembni, saj kažejo znanstveno preverljivo in na desetletjih zbranih podatkov utemeljeno smer, ki ji moramo slediti. Prilagoditi moramo le način, kako tej smeri slediti. Ocenjujem, da vemo in znamo dovolj, da je znanost dovolj napredovala in da je gospodarstvo dovolj močno, da nimamo več izgovorov za odlašanje in da lahko stopimo na to ambiciozno pot, ki vodi v lepšo in varnejšo prihodnost. To nenazadnje dolgujemo vsem generacijam, ki prihajajo za nami. To pomeni, da moramo najti nov fokus in razmišljati izven okvirjev. Najti moramo nove gospodarske prakse in razviti veščine, ki bodo v vseh pogledih bolj trajnostni, tako v odnosu do narave, kot tudi do ljudi in časa. Tisti, ki bodo pri zelenem prehodu uspešnejši, bodo tudi konkurenčnejši. Morda na tem mestu samo ena kratka cezura. Pred tednom dni sem se srečala s predstavniki slovenskih kmetov in jim na glas povedala, da se bo tudi slovensko kmetijstvo moralo prilagoditi. Kakšen plas se je vsul name na Twitterju in na družbenih omrežjih, ampak povedala sem jim, da če ne bodo znali speljati tega prehoda, ne bodo uspešni. Uspešen bo tisti, ki se zaveda ovir pred seboj in priložnosti. In vsaka ovira predstavlja na nek način tudi priložnost. In jaz upam, da se bodo tudi slovenski kmetje zavedali tega. Povabili so me, da postanem ambasadorica slovenskega kmetijstva, bom z največjim veseljem, če se bodo pogovori zavrteli v tisto smer, za katero vsi vemo, da je na koncu prava. Zeleni prehod je skratka priložnost, ker dejansko vključuje vse vidike naše družbe in našega življenja. Ustvarja nova delovna mesta, ima pomembno vlogo pri zadrževanju nadarjenih mladih v naši domovini, spodbuja inovacije in razvoj novih, čistejših tehnologij, z roko v roki stopa za digitalizacijo. In če se še malce povrnem na tem mestu na kmete, povedala sem jim tudi, da Evropa marsikdaj ni pravična do slovenskega kmeta. Slovenski kmetje so že zelo zmanjšali uporabo umetnih gnojil in herbicidov, to jim je treba priznati. In zdaj, ko Evropa govori, da jih je potrebno znižati še za 50%, razumem njihov revolt, ker v Franciji in Nemčiji so precej višje številke uporabe neprimernih sredstev za zeleni preboj in bodo seveda lažje zmanjšali za 50, naši kmetje, slovenski kmetje pa seveda veliko težje. Tako da upam, da bo tudi gospodarstvo in mi v politiki ta njihov problem, da ga bomo razumeli. Zdaj, da gredo čistejše tehnologije z roko v roki z digitalizacijo in modernim prebojem, temu pritrjuje seveda tudi ugotovitve mednarodne organizacije za delo. Prilagajanje na podnebne spremembe in zmanjševanje izpustov toplogrednih plinov vodita do več novih, boljših delovnih mest, obstoječim, predvsem tistim iz delovno intenzivnih industrij, pa zagotavlja možnost prekvalificiranja. Zeleni prehod zato ne uničuje delovnih mest in ne zavira gospodarske rasti. To je dezinformacija. Zeleni prehod nam ponuja številne priložnosti, ki pozitivno vplivajo na blaginjo življenja. Uspešen zeleni prehod je trajni pečat, ki bo našim otrokom in njihovim otrokom omogočil kakovostno in varno življenje na našem planetu. Ko sem se odločila za politično pot, sem kot ženska v politiko vstopila z željo pustiti pečat, ki bo trajnosten in ne bo omejen z naslednjimi volitvami. Veliko sem se pogovarjala z mladimi in vem, kako zelo jih podnebne spremembe skrbijo. Zeleni prehod je zato tudi priložnost za nas, njihove starše, da jih preprosto ne bomo pustili na cedilu. Spoštovani, pri velikih spremembah sta ključna iskrenost in zgled. Iskreno moramo verjeti v zadane cilje in jim tudi slediti. Dela namesto nas ne more opraviti nihče drug. Verjamem, da bo projekt Chapter Zero Slovenia združeval oboje, iskrenost v zadanih ciljih in zgled pri njihovem izpolnjevanju. V Sloveniji imamo odlične menedžerke in menedžerje, nadzornice in nadzornike, voditeljice in voditelje. Dosežki vaših zaposlenih in podjetij so že večkrat dokazali, da vam inovativnost in razmišljanje izven okvirjev ne predstavljata ovir pri razvoju, temveč spodbudo pri zviševanju konkurenčnosti, pa tudi pri izboljšanju kvalitete življenja, kar seveda še posebej srčno pozdravljam. Chapter Zero Slovenia zato pomeni dvoje. Cilj, ki ga moramo doseči, in prvi današnji korak na poti krožnega gospodarstva in odgovornega trajnostnega razvoja. Na tej poti, najpomembnejši, ki jo mora prehoditi naša generacija, nam vsem želim veliko uspeha, predvsem pa preudarnosti. Ne pozabimo, da drug drugemu pri tem seveda lahko pomagamo. Na tem stoji svet. Hvala lepa.
Thank you, Madam President, for these kind words. I will do a brief recap of your speech in English. Madam President talked about European Green Deal and how objectives of Paris Accord is comparable to landing on the moon, as that time said by head of European Commission at the time, Ursula von der Leyen. We are facing big challenges, such as health and security challenges, but we need to ensure that objectives of Paris Climate Agreement remain at the top of our agenda. Madam President emphasized that the agenda is particularly important for business environment and that we are developing too slowly in terms of transition to innovation-driven growth and circular economy. She talked about farmers and her interactions with farmers, how they need to adapt to climate change and how we are not supposed to let our kids down. Yes. There's a misconception, in her own words, that green transition represents a number of obstacles to businesses, but she sees that as opportunity, and she also is convinced that the green transition does not destroy jobs and hold back economic growth. This is disinformation, as She said correctly. She concluded her speech with her view that Chapter Zero Slovenia is therefore twofold, a goal to be achieved, and a first step on the path towards a circular economy and responsible sustainable development. Thank you very much for your speech. So let us continue on. It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage the three founding members of the Chapter Zero Slovenia: Barbara Uranjek, CEO of the British-Slovenian Chamber of Commerce; Gorazd Podbevšek, Chair of the Slovenian Directors Association; and Barbara Žibret-Kralj, partner of Deloitte Slovenia. I have a few questions for you. Ms. Uranjek, as a host organizer of and founding event of this event, you play an important role in shaping the direction objectives of this initiative, Chapter Zero Slovenia. Can you share with us what inspired Chamber of Commerce to do so and establish Chapter Zero Slovenia?
Thank you, Jure, and good morning to everyone. First, it was a personal inspiration. So 2 years ago, we started organizing events on the topic of climate change at the Chamber. It was a run-up to COP26, a big climate conference organized by the British government in Glasgow. And one of these events was also a climb to Triglav, organized by the British Embassy. So it was 30 of us climbing Triglav to observe the Triglav glacier. And we had some climatologists with us, some experts. And then when you come up to Kredarica, you have this beautiful view of this huge plateau in front of you. And Miha Pavšek from SAZU, a specialist in observing this glacier, explained that this used to be the size of 55 football fields, and now it's less than one football field large. And this is something that really touches you and inspires you to make every change possible. Then second, the inspiration came professionally. So just observing the UK being one of the first countries to pledge to net zero by 2050 and having very high climate goals and objectives, I was really inspired by that. I have to say that it's a real honor and privilege that our chamber can be the host organization of Chapter Zero Slovenia. But also, I'm very honored that we have a group of these great experts here. And I'm happy that most of them are women, actually. Sorry, Micha. Because I think we have so much knowledge here. And basically, the mission of Chapter Zero Slovenia is to bring knowledge into the boardroom. And so I'm challenging everyone here and inviting all of you, non-executive and executive board directors, to become members. It's free of charge, and we are also all working pro bono, by the way, where you can find the knowledge, and you can also help us prevent more glaciers melting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Uranjek. Mr. Podbevšek, as a chair of Slovenian Directors Association, your role is pivotal into how to implement role of management to green transition. How can this initiative help Slovenian companies rise to this challenge?
I think it can be very, very helpful. We're a community of supervisory board members that believe we can do things better in Slovenia. And we started with this ESG, we started with the G part. We wanted to improve governance in Slovenia, and we spent a lot of time doing that. Then we started with the S part, the social, meaning the relationships between the stakeholders, the responsibility towards other than only shareholders. And the E part is something that we as an association have been a bit slow to address because in our minds other things were kind of very much a priority because we had huge problems with the basics of governance in Slovenia. But now we really want to address this important part of the ESG topic as well. And once we found out there's another community, the Chapter Zero community, that's an international community of board members that deals with this specific issue, it was sort of a no-brainer for us to combine with them and try to offer this knowledge, this know-how, and the exchange of experience to Slovenian board members as well.
Thank you, Mr. Podbešak. Ms. Barbara Žibert-Kraj, Deloitte is also co-founder of Chapter Zero UK, now Chapter Zero Slovenia. Why is Chapter Zero so important initiative for our country?
Thank you, Jure, for the question, and good morning, everybody. Yes, Deloitte is a partner funder in many countries in Europe, I would say even in the world. Why Slovenia? Because Slovenia is simply not isolated. And when we are talking about the environmental changes, climate changes, for sure, there Slovenia is not isolated. Why it's so important for Slovenia? I'm coming from business, and coming from business, I must say that sometimes I'm actually a little bit sad when I hear from the top representatives of our companies that sustainability, ESG initiatives, regulations can be the obstacle. And it was also said in the speech of our president that our farmers do see it as an obstacle. It's for sure it's not an obstacle. They need to see that it is must. It is must. We need to adopt. We need to go into this direction. Otherwise, we will be just left behind. And why Deloitte is partnering in Chapter Zero is really because we believe we must give the content. We must skill up our companies. We must skill up our economy. We must give the knowledge to our managers, to our supervisory board members, because the changes can happen with the regulation. But if it is the regulation which is driving it, then it means it will be perceived as an obstacle. It needs to start top-down. It needs to start with supervisory board, with the governments, with the managers. And I'm really, really honored to be partner in this company, because that means that we are on the right way. But we just need to start running. We are too slow, like it was said. If we will not speed up, we will be left behind, and we will not lose, but we will not get any competitive advantage. We are small and flexible. Small and flexible fishes can run faster than the big ones. And we have here the opportunity. We need to do the change.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barbara Žibert-Kraj. This is why we are here, to make a first step. So please welcome to the stage our esteemed guest, as well, Her Majesty's Ambassador to Republic of Slovenia, Tiffany Sadler, who has been a passionate advocate for climate action. It's an honor to have you here, Ms. Ambassador. Can you share with us our thoughts on Chapter Zero Slovenia? Also, we would be interested to hear about the new developments in the UK climate policy and how they align with the goals of initiative Chapter Zero Slovenia.
Thank you, Yuri. So, Madam President, Miha, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, thank you very much for giving me the floor today and for your welcome. And thank you also for the honour that you have bestowed on me by asking me to be an ambassador for the new Chapter Zero here in Slovenia. The UK is absolutely committed to tackling climate change. Barbara, as you have mentioned, we were the first major economy to put net zero into law. Since 2010, we've invested nearly £200 billion into green energy in the UK, from offshore wind farms to solar. And we're committed to acting globally. We've committed over £11 billion into climate finance to tackle some of the issues that Madam President was speaking about in Africa and elsewhere. And we were proud to host COP26 in Glasgow in 2021, the biggest international summit the UK has ever hosted. And gosh, it was a little complicated, and resulting in the Glasgow Climate Pact. So it's a great pleasure to be asked to be ambassador for Chapter Zero in Slovenia, and to be adding it to my other job title of His Majesty's Ambassador for the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's a second ambassadorial role, but one which is no less important, and one which I suspect, I have no doubt in saying, that His Majesty would firmly approve of. So, ladies and gentlemen, the launch of Slovenia's very own Chapter Zero is a very exciting day. I'm confident that Chapter Zero will be a great success here in Slovenia. Why do I say that with such confidence? Firstly, because Chapter Zero is an idea whose time has very much come. Climate change, as colleagues have said, is the existential challenge for our generation and for generations to come. And non-executives, I believe, are uniquely well placed to help drive change in the boardroom, in realigning businesses for the future, and in seizing the opportunities, as others have mentioned, posed by the green transition. It was in recognition of that existential challenge that the UK's Chapter Slovenia also was set up, one of the first in the world. I understand not the first, but one of the first. And boy, has Chapter Zero proved its worth as a global network and a force for change. But there's another reason why I have such confidence that Chapter Zero Slovenia will be a success. And that's because of the people in this room. Because of the commitment I know there is here in Slovenia to tackling climate change, particularly in the business community. I've been serving here as British ambassador for about 2.5 years. And over those 2.5 years, we in the embassy have worked with the Slovene Chamber of Commerce on a stream of events focusing on climate change. All of them well attended, all of them fizzing with ideas, and all of them full, if you'll excuse the very bad pun, of green energy. During my first few weeks here in Slovenia, back in 2020, I opened a joint embassy chamber event on green finance. From the City of London, we were joined by the late Sir Roger Gifford, chair of the Green Finance Institute. On the Slovene side were the Ministry of Finance and Slovene banks, including NLB. Together, they had a rich and fascinating discussion about integrating climate risks and opportunities into mainstream financial decision-making. They shared expertise between the City of London and Slovenia, and they picked up ideas from each other. The question at the core of that event was whether green money can both generate reforms and save the planet, a question to which they concluded the answer was definitely yes. A few months later, in the spring of 2021, the embassy again joined up with the Chamber, this time for 2 seminars on smart cities and e-mobility, working with local government and business. This time, we looked at how we are all going to make the huge but essential shift from fossil-fueled cars and planes onto green transport. Then there followed, in the countdown to COP26, a workshop with the Slovenian Banking Association to talk about what business needed from Glasgow and how climate change is shaping global finance. And then after COP26, we organised another session, this time to look at some of the outcomes of Glasgow and what the Glasgow Climate Pact meant for business. There I was honoured to share the stage with Tina Kobilšek, who had been in Glasgow, as Slovenia's chief negotiator on climate change. Slovenia played a huge and important role at Glasgow, representing the EU presidency. Last year at Bled Strategic Forum, I then shared a panel again with Tina, this time talking about COP27 and the build-up to that. So look, a wonderful story of partnerships, of the UK and Slovenia, of business, government and civil society, all working together to tackle the existential challenge of our time. And I'm glad that we're all coming together again, this time to see how we can tackle climate change in the boardroom, bringing non-executives together to share experience and work together. For I've listed a number of initiatives that the Chamber and Embassy have worked on together on climate change in my 2.5 years here. But my personal favourite, like Barbara's, is the climb that we did up Mount Triglav in 2021. We decided to do the climb together, stopping at Triglav Glacier on the way with a group of Slovene students. It was the run-up to COP26. We wanted to highlight, in a simple and direct way, the risks posed by climate change to our communities and to our young people who were with us. And we also wanted to highlight the responsibility on all of us to tackle that existential challenge. I'm sure many of you in the audience will have done that climb. Perhaps many of you have also looked down at Triglav Glacier on the way. As Barbara said, it used to be football pitches. It is now just a little patch of ice. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, what are we giving to our next generation? We must tackle this. But the other thing about that hike, that walk up, that I think inspired me, is it wasn't just highlighting the challenge that is posed by climate change, but I think we also worked together as a team, did we not? And I suppose that is the thought that I want to leave with you, that working together in partnership as a team, we can overcome all these challenges. So on that note, let me finish with a couple of final words. First of all, a very big thank you to all of the organisers today, It really is an extraordinary moment. I feel like we're at the start of something very, very exciting. And a hearty endorsement once again for Chapter Zero and all it stands for. What a wonderful, wonderful initiative. And lastly, if I may be permitted one word in Slovene, a heartfelt srećno to everyone here today and for the future. Thank you.
We have heard that there's also your personal commitment to your habits. We heard that traveling back to UK, you contributed to climate change. Can you share?
I fear travelling back to the UK, I do contribute to climate change. But look, you're right, I am acutely conscious, as Miha has said, about preaching from the pulpit here. I am also acutely conscious, as Madam President has said, that I am an affluent European. The amount of carbon emissions that come from me and my family is enormous compared to so many people around the world in Africa and elsewhere. But since you mentioned trains, if I can offer one word of inspiration to other people in the room, I am a great, passionate admirer of the European train network, and I travel back to the UK when I can by train. I do not do it all the time, but I do that when I can. It takes a little longer. It's a little more complicated to organise, but wow, there are some amazing views, and you meet some wonderful people on the way. I'm actually going to Sofia next week by train, so I'm not sure whether I will come back to Sofia with so many glowing reports. But yes, I heartily advocate it.
Thank you very much for that inspiration. I seem to need to apologize a bit for my confusion today. He, she, hers. I think that that's just a testament that climate change is gender neutral. So thank you, Madam Ambassador, for this. It is my pleasure to introduce our two next speakers. Please welcome to the stage Katrina Litvak, Chairman of Climate Governance Initiative, and Mojca Markizetti, Head of Working Group of Chapter Zero Slovenia, and ESG and Climate Director of Deloitte. Together, they will discuss 8 principles of Climate Governance Initiative.
Firstly, a short introduction of Ms. Litvak. Karina Litvak serves as a chair of the governing board of World Economic Forum Principles for Effective Climate Governance. With a really rich background of significant contribution in finance and extensive experience in leadership positions, Karina has become a leading voice in the global conversation on corporate responsibility and climate change. Since COP21 in 2015, Karina has worked to build a global network for fellow board directors that in 2019 became the Climate Governance Initiative. Karina, it's really my honor to be here with you, to talk to you. And firstly, I would like to thank you for your tremendous support in the past months to all the team for establishing the Chapter Zero of Slovenia. Thank you.
Well, actually, I want to say that I'm actually really humbled to be here today because can you hear me now?
Now it should.
Can you hear me? Ah, that's much better. Okay. I just want to say, Miha got in touch 2 years ago. I now regret that I didn't give you more support because you have achieved so much. You, Barbara, the team, Mojca. It's really impressive, and it really is a testament to what I come from a small country, which is Canada, big in physical space, but still small in population. What you have achieved today really, really knocks my socks off. I think you've done a fantastic job in terms of assembling incredibly capable people. So really, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we have all the intentions to continue in that pace, okay? Yeah. Before we jump to the 8 principles, in 2017 already, before the 8 principles, you've already established the the Chapter Zero Italy. How did that happen, actually?
Very simply, I joined the board of an oil and gas major, Eni, in 2014, after 25 years of working in sustainable finance. And I realized, it was a very humbling feeling, that it was, in fact, much more difficult than I ever imagined when I was an investor to make the kind of change that's necessary when you're sitting in the boardroom. It's really complicated. Every month we were being asked to approve multi-billion euro capital investment projects in Mozambique, in Ghana, in Kazakhstan, etc. And honestly, every single time I thought, am I approving something that is going to lock us into a project that will become uneconomic and create great damage to the environment? And I didn't have the tools to really contribute to a productive discussion about how we should be looking at this. And that's what gave me the idea, along with investors, frankly. Investors put me on that board to drive change, and I didn't know how to do it. And so I contacted the World Economic Forum with the help of the chief executive officer of ENI, Claudio Descalzi, and our chairwoman, Emma Marcegaglia, with their very strong support, to say we need to create a home, an initiative for non-executive directors so that they have the knowledge, but also the motivation, the support to drive the change that's necessary. Because let me tell you something, all of you who are directors here, or who will become directors, or who deal with directors because you're, general counsel or company secretary or chief financial officer, you will hear from fellow directors again and again, we're not an NGO, we're not the government, we're not professors, we're not civil society, our job is to make money. So remember what your job is. Your job here is to generate value for shareholders. So why are you bringing up this irrelevant issue? Or, it's not that I'm against science, but it's not for us to solve the problems of the world. This is the refrain that you will hear again and again. And the purpose of Chapter Zero is to help you win the argument when you're in the boardroom. None of you need convincing that this is important, but the people with whom you serve in boardrooms don't necessarily share that commitment, and our job is to persuade them. And I spent 6 years in the wilderness trying to persuade my colleagues from 2014 to 2020. 2020 was the turning point in my company, ENI, and since then, we have really embarked on a major transformation of the company. But it was not like this the first 6 years. And I have seen up close what it takes to transform mindsets. It's entirely possible, but it takes some skill, and unfortunately, it takes real courage and a willingness to be told again and again, you're wrong.
Thank you, Karina. So we'll be talking today shortly about the 8 principles which you came up with to support the boardrooms of directors, supervisory boards, and so on, to bring climate issues into the boardrooms and to tackle them and to embed them into strategy. And dear guests, you all got leaflets with this summary of these 8 principles, and we do have them here as well. Karina, what was the main goal? What was the driver and the guidance when you were composing these 8 principles?
Okay, can I just say, I didn't compose them. The World Economic Forum, right?
Yeah.
Commissioned, actually it was PwC, sorry, who consulted 60 or 80 people. I was one of those voices. And essentially, the input that I and others gave was every single committee in the board, the risk committee, the remuneration committee, if there's a strategy committee, the strategy committee, the nominations committee, the governance committee, all of us have an opportunity, and I would say an obligation, to understand how a climate angle needs to be incorporated in what we do. So if you look at these 8 principles, they fit into, in a very practical sense, what it is that each of those committees do. So starting with the first one, climate accountability on board. The first objection that I got from directors, I've spoken literally, I want to say, probably to several hundred directors over the last, since 2015 when this idea first occurred to me. The first objection that I got from investors was, my job is to deliver maximum returns to shareholders. If what you're asking me to do is to leave profitable business on the table, I'm in breach of my legal duties as a director. And I'm going to get sued and certainly fired for my job as a director. And so the very first, if you like, gateway drug, gateway issue was to persuade directors, with help from lots of lawyers, that actually it is our legal responsibility to look at this issue. We commissioned a big study that initially covered 20 countries plus the EU 27. And we reissue it every year with more countries that we've added on. Civil law, common law, Ottoman law, Sharia law, right? To look at what are the definitions, the standard definitions of the legal duties of directors. I can sum it up in very simple terms. We have a duty of diligence, a duty of loyalty, right? And we have an obligation to consider what it poses a material risk to business. Given that it is now widely understood, including by central banks, that climate change poses the single greatest risk to global systemic financial stability, ergo, by definition, climate change is a relevant material consideration for boards, and to fail to consider them is a breach of duty. That was the very first, kind of critical issue that we needed to get across the line. And then from there, the others flow naturally. So command of the subject is simply making sure that board directors have a good, solid understanding of the basics of climate science and the macroeconomics of climate. That doesn't mean that they know specifically what it means for their company. That's the next stage. But even getting to that basic level, which 99% of directors lack, is necessary. So getting somebody to come in and talk to your board and walk you through. We brought someone in who was the co-chair of the IPCC drafting team, and I gather one of the members of your steering committee is a member of that. So she knows him, Professor Carlo Carraro. It was fantastic. And he came and spoke to us. It was supposed to be for an hour. It lasted for 2.5 hours because we had so many questions for him. And that really got people to understand why this matters. It didn't give them the answers of what we had to do, but it made them worry and care, first thing. And then from there, all the other things, again, continue logically. So board structure, who should drive this? Well, clearly in the first instance, the entire board is ultimately responsible for what gets decided here, the strategy. But as you all know, the board agenda is always overfull. And as happens with audit or remuneration or any number of other quite detailed technical issues, it often gets delegated to a committee. It's not absolutely necessary, but in many cases, it makes good sense. In my case, I chair the Sustainability and Scenarios Committee, which looks at scenarios, net zero scenarios, but also the standard scenarios, but it looks at climate change and our climate strategy. I would certainly encourage you and your boards to think about which committee is going to own this topic and then bring it back to the whole board for discussion and approval. And then think in terms of the risk committee and the audit committee. What do they need to do to look at these issues? Simple example. The audit committee is looking at provisions and impairments. If the world is changing and you're sitting on, dozens of, in my case, oil and gas assets, productive assets, what happens if we're going to accelerate the transition to net zero? The business as usual trajectory means these assets have a certain value and they will generate a certain amount of cash flows over time. But if we're going to accelerate the transition and therefore closure of these assets, that means a big chunk of those future cash flows will no longer materialize. That means the present value of these assets, the so-called value in use, is lower. If that is lower than the book value at which we carry them in the accounts, we have to take an impairment charge. We have to stress test all of our assets against a net zero by 2050 scenario to ensure that we are not carrying assets that are potentially worthless if this transition happens. And we have to be transparent to our shareholders about what that looks like. So here, a good practical illustration of how the audit committee needs to understand climate change in terms of its functions and its duties to shareholders. Material risk and opportunities. The risk committee needs to have a really good, broad understanding of how climate risk feeds into the risk management process. When I first arrived in the board of ENI and said, where's climate change on our risk matrix? They said, oh, you're right. Okay, we'll put it on. And it would always come up as low probability and low impact. And I thought, we're in the oil business. I kind of think there must be something wrong in the reasoning that we employ if the conclusion is low impact, low probability. With enough, challenge and thinking, and please go back and please consult and please get external expert advice about how we look at risk, it's now come right up the risk register into high impact, high probability, and therefore that triggers a number of mitigation actions, right? And that's what, of course, has driven the transformation strategy. So material risk and opportunity is absolutely central to how any company is going to look at the impact that climate change has for the business model and the strategy. Strategic integration, see, all of this flows very logically into each piece. So then, when you're doing strategy, in my company, we would typically have a 4-year rolling strategic planning process, which means that every year we would look at the next 4 years, and the following year we would drop last year and add another year. And so this was a kind of gradual update of the strategy with all of the details on capital investment and, everything that flows from that in terms of international footprint and so forth. What was missing was the 30-year strategic journey and the 10-year plan. And that's what ended up having to be added to strategic planning. Now, obviously, if you're planning over 4 years, you have a fair degree of visibility. If you're planning over 10, you have less. And if you're planning over 30 to get to 2050, as was the case in 2020, it's a little bit fuzzy, but you still have to know where you're going to be in 2050 so that you know, working backwards, what you have to do this year. Because if you're running an oil and gas company, or same with any number of industries that have very big ticket, high fixed cost assets, take shipping, you need to invest now in your shipping fleet in order for it to be net zero by 2050. Those ships have a 30-year life on them. Same in oil and gas, same in mining, same in steel, etc. So we have to wrap up. Oh, I have to shake your hand. Thank you. Because I'm going to see you,
have to go to Hungary right now.
and then you will be EU commissioner someday, so keep it up. Oh, good luck. Yeah. Okay, how much time have we got? Am I running out of time? Okay. Incentivization, how we pay people drives culture, unfortunately. If you pay people to do A, don't expect them to do B. And a very practical illustration of that is in my industry, for eons, we have been paying our executives to replace reserves, reserve replacement rate. So, oil and gas reserves are a naturally depleting asset. They deplete at between 5 and 7% per year. Therefore, every oil and gas company, for purposes of financial sustainability, the old definition of sustainability, financial only sustainability, was you need to invest every year to extend the life of your reserves or acquire new reserves. And we were rewarding people with, nice bonuses if they kept that reserve replacement rate above 100%. Suddenly, if the discussion is about weaning ourselves off oil and gas, is about reducing our exposure to assets that will have to be written down, that will be stranded, well then reserve replacement is a completely perverse incentive on which to be rewarding people. You want to take that out, and which we did. It took me 6 years to persuade my colleagues to do that, but we did take it out, okay? We took it out, and we replaced it with new indicators, the so-called key performance indicators, KPIs, that were tied to increase in renewable generation capacity, because that is the new direction of the business. Renewable generation capacity is not necessarily profitable in the early years because it's all cash negative. You're building and you're not yet selling anything. So it's a counterintuitive way of rewarding your people, but it is a way of tying in their behavior to what it is you want to achieve. And this is what the remuneration committee needs to be thinking about. It's not as simple as simply saying, we align, shareholder interests with executives, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the benefits to show through. Reporting and disclosure, I think this is the one that every director knows about because we have the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, that has been passed by the EU, and all of you, I'm sure, have heard about it. It is extremely onerous. It is the most ambitious, the most comprehensive standard in the world. Even we in any who are champions of, the transformation and who believe very strongly that disclosure drives behavioral change. Nobody likes to disclose embarrassing information. So when you start to disclose something that you hadn't disclosed before and it looks bad, you start to fix it. And if you hadn't been reporting on it before, you didn't even know that you had a problem. So it's a very virtuous process to force people to disclose. But this new CSRD is tough because it demands a great deal of detail. Nevertheless, it's going to be the law. It may be more or less, it may be adjusted because of pushback from companies, but it is very demanding, far more demanding than what you see coming out of the United States with the Securities and Exchange Commission's new guidelines. They're still in development, but they're not yet there. Or the IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards, is coming out with a sustainability reporting standard. It will not be as ambitious as the EU law. So that raises some interesting conundrums for us as European countries in terms of competitiveness, which we can come to. And then exchange is the final one, and my personal favorite, which is how we as directors ensure that we continue to be alert to external views. Because as independents, our job is to bring in outside perspectives into the boardroom and not simply absorb what management tell us in order to basically rubber stamp everything that management propose. So our job is to bring in independent, challenging views. And the only way to do that is to exchange, is to engage with academic experts, investors, civil society groups, political and regulatory leaders. That's how we learn about what's coming around the corner and how we can really help strengthen our company. So I'll stop there and now we can look at the difficulties associated with applying all this.
Karina, thank you for this short dive into the 8 principles. And everybody, you got the leaflets. If you go to the website of the Chapter Zero Slovenia, you will also see the longer document with more guidance, questions, and everything. And today with Karina, we will be recording a podcast that is going to be published in a couple of weeks. And I already invite you to listen to that. It's going to be about the principles. And after that, we're going to be dealing with other issues as well. But Karina, for our final comment, you already mentioned the let's say, interesting and quite a difficult challenge that CSRD is going to bring upon the European companies. And we've touched that already several times throughout today, that sometimes companies throughout the region, we hear from them that this is going to hold back their ambition and hold back their ability to be competitive in the global market, which we're part of. So maybe a short comment from your side, because we've discussed that previously and would like you to share this with our crew.
Right. Well, the first thing to say is, the first thing to do is to acknowledge that this is a genuine concern. There is no question, but that if we have uneven rules around the world and we compete internationally, if we are held in Europe to very stringent standards, it makes it more difficult to compete with people who are, free to pollute with no limits. So, the example would be my company, which runs refineries, and those refineries have to pay hundreds of millions of euros every year through the emissions trading scheme, the EU emissions trading scheme. And so the natural reaction is to shut down those refineries in Italy, in Germany. And then what happens? We import refined products from Asia. So not only are the exact same products being distributed in Europe, but they're being transported to Europe. So it's actually worse. This is what's called carbon leakage. And so it's important not to dismiss this concern. It's a very real one. The CSRD is going to force us to invest time and effort into being much more transparent. That per se doesn't make us less competitive. But if we are prevented from doing things that our competitors in other countries are allowed to do with no restrictions, then it is a restriction on our competitiveness. The answer to that is that there are several answers. One is that the CSRD, very cleverly this time around, has extended its applicability to non-EU companies. So any non-EU company that sells above a certain threshold in the EU 27 has to comply. So one of my friends works for an investment bank. She's advising a huge American cruise ship operator, right? Not the cleanest business in the world. Of course, they have cruise ships come all over Europe. They have to comply with the CSRD, and they're having to figure out how they're going to make their ships zero carbon, because they don't want to have to disclose that they are dumping hundreds of millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. So the EU has thought about this. The other thing it's done, you might have heard something called CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. Our chapter in Malaysia is very worried about CBAM, very happy about CBAM because we're all about carbon, but very worried for its members because Malaysia is it's the #2 exporter of palm oil in the world. And so actually, any product that is going to be imported into Europe under CBAM, which comes into effect in 2026, if it is produced in conditions where there is not a comparable carbon price to what we have in the EU will apply an import tax, right? So what does that do? It incentivizes Malaysia, Turkey, all of these other countries to tax carbon to the same level that the EU does. A very virtuous outcome. In the case of the palm oil that Malaysia exports, the EU has simply said, no mas, no more palm oil. It will be allowed to enter the EU come 2030, which is a big concern, obviously, for Malaysia. It's 30% of their GDP. So this is a good illustration of how EU law is basically affecting how foreign competition behaves. And then, of course, the final thing to say is this is ultimately about positioning our companies for long-term competitiveness. We may make more money in the next 5-10 years by ignoring the reality that is the climate crisis, but the price we will pay for having done that will be so prohibitive. Businesses will fail. My company, we just had a conversation yesterday. I was in Milan for my committee meeting, and literally our own staff said, we are in a declining, sunsetting business. Our business will disappear. We know this. So that's why we have to reinvent who we are, so that when investors, as they're starting to say, unfortunately today, in light of the Ukraine war, in light of the spike in oil prices, we've had some investors say to us, can you just hit the pause button for a bit on the climate transition, because there's a lot of money to be made right now by just pumping more oil. We have to say, sorry, we've embarked on this transition. It's not like we can suddenly switch it off. This is the direction that we are following. We are going to stick with it. 3 years ago, you were very happy we were doing this. 3 years from now, you will be very happy that we have done it. And right now, it doesn't look so appealing, but we know that this is the right direction to take. And I think all of us in the boardroom have to have that longer-term vision. We have to have the confidence to say, we know this is the right thing to do. Sometimes our investors will be mistaken and focused on the near term, but our job is to look at the long term.
So bottom line, it's all about the long-term vision and prosperity of the company and everybody around the company. It started to happen. There's no turning back. It's not going to be easy. It's like Churchill said, it's going to be blood, sweat, and tears and everything. No, it's not going to be easy. Whoever says it's going to be easy is mistaken or, but it's the only way. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Karina.
Thank you
and
all.
We'll be continuing with the...
Thank you, Ms. Litvak and Ms. Marchesetti, for this passionate and educational talk. Thank you very much. And we will continue now with our next speaker, a distinguished climate expert. Please welcome to the stage Mojca Dolinar, Director of Meteorology, Hydrology and Oceanographic Office at the Ministry of the Environment, Climate and Energy of the Republic of Slovenia.
Thank you. Hvala lepa za povabilo. Veliko veselje mi je biti danes z vami na tem, mislim, da zelo pomembnem dogodku za naše podnebje. Moja prezentacija bo v slovenskem jeziku, prisojnice so pa v angleškem jeziku, da bodo naši angleško govoreči gostje lažje sledili. No, ko govorimo o podnebnih spremembah, je temperatura tista glavni indikator, na katerega se fokusiramo. Povprečna globalna temperatura Zemlje raste, to je dejstvo, to poznamo vsi. Zdaj, ta temperatura, če se na primer ozremo zdaj ven, da gremo ven, temperatura je 12-13 stopinj, pravzaprav nam je vseeno, ne? Ali je 12 ali 13, sami ne bomo čutili bistvene razlike. Ne? Ko pa govorimo o globalni temperaturi, je pa 1 stopinja bistvena razlika. Zakaj? Ker ta temperatura pravzaprav ni tista temperatura, ki jo občutimo, ne smemo s tem mešati, ampak nam kaže, v kakšnem energetskem sistemu je naša Zemlja, ali pa lahko rečemo kar podnebje Zemljino. Ne? To je zelo podobno kot recimo naša telesna temperatura. Ne? Ko je pol stopinje višja od normalne, se že čudno počutimo. Procesi v našem telesu so drugačni. Zelo podobno je s podnebnim sistemom. Ko povišamo samo za 1/10 temperaturo, zvišamo, so procesi drugačni. In ko jo višamo, so procesi vedno bolj burni. Ne? In to nas skrbi. Zdaj, zakaj je povišanje temperature tako kritično? Ne? Zakaj smo se v pariškem dogovoru dogovorili, da je ne zvišamo ogrevanja podnebne globalne temperature nad 2 stopinje, celo nekaj let zatem smo šli na 1,5 stopinjo. Zakaj je to tako pomembno? Ko dvigamo temperaturo Zemlje, je tako, kot da bi neko frnikulo potiskali po nekem klančku navzgor. Ne? In ko pridemo na vrh tega klanca, ne potrebujemo več nič. Samo majhen dotik frnikule in nam zgrmi po drugem klancu navzdol. In to se dogaja z našo Zemljo in z našim podnebjem. Ne? Če bomo prišli do vrha tega klanca, se pravi, da bomo temperaturo dvignili nad neko določeno mejo, nam bo podnebje ušlo in ne vemo kam. V totalno drugi svet, lahko rečemo, kot ga danes poznamo. In zaradi tega je zelo, zelo pomembno, da ostanemo pod 2 stopinje, še bolje pod 1,5. Zdaj, dvig temperature ni edino, kar se spreminja. Ne? To je samo nek indikator, spreminja pa se celotno podnebje. Ena od bistvenih stvari, ki jih gledamo pri spremembah podnebja, je sprememba padavin, celotnega vodnega kroga. Ne? Ker padavine nam prinašajo vode, to je bistvo življenja. Ne? In dejstvo je, da se, ko gledamo globalno spremembo podnebja, najbolj zaskrbljujoče je to, da se nam določeni deli, ki so že zdaj zelo suhi, še bolj sušijo. Ne? Puščave se širijo, po drugi strani deli, ki so že sedaj mokri, bodo še bolj mokri. Ne? Poleg tega pa ta celotni vodni cikel se, kot sem že prej rekla, ne, ker imamo več energije v podnebnem sistemu, je celotno to dogajanje bolj burno. Recimo v Sloveniji to čutimo kot bolj burne nevihte, te konvektivne pojave. Imamo ob nevihtah bolj intenzivne padavine, več toče, hujše viharje. Ne, in podobno je tudi v svetu. Pa ne samo padavine, ne, tudi oceani so del našega podnebnega sistema in občutimo zelo hude spremembe tudi v oceanih. Temperatura se dviga zgornje plasti vode podobno kot ozračja. Mogoče v sami temperaturi ne toliko, ker ima sama voda večjo toplotno kapaciteto in se počasneje ogreva, ampak v tej zgornjem delu oceana je shranjeno bistveno več energije kot v ozračju. In to nas skrbi predvsem za prihodnost, ker vsa ta energija, tudi ko bomo ustavili vse izpuste toplogrednih plinov, bo tam akumulirana in se bo potem počasi spuščala. Zato to je tudi eden od razlogov, da ne moremo podnebnih sprememb ustaviti naenkrat. Ne. To je kot tovornjak, ki ga je zelo težko ustaviti, ko ima enkrat zelo veliko hitrost. Ne moremo ga naenkrat ustaviti. No, in zaradi ogrevanja vode se nam dviga tudi vodna gladina. No, to je polovica tega vzroka, zakaj se vodna gladina dviga in to zelo hitro. In tudi to je eden od tistih najbolj zaskrbljujočih delov, ko govorimo o podnebnih spremembah, ker tudi dviga morske gladine ne moremo naenkrat ustaviti. Tudi če danes ustavimo vse izpuste toplogrednih plinov, se bo morska gladina dvigala še stoletja. No, eden stranskih vzrokov podnebnih sprememb v oceanih je pa zakislevanje oceanov. pH oceanov se dviga zaradi tega, ker se več ogljikovega dioksida raztaplja v zgornji plasti oceanov nastaja ogljikova kislina, postaja bolj kislo okolje in to je pa velik problem za celotno življenje v oceanih. Korale so samo en tak primer. Potem naslednji del podnebnega sistema je pa ledeni pokrov. Danes smo slišali že nekaj v našem ledeniku, ne. Še huje je po svetu, ne. Ker ne samo, da se kopni ledeniki talijo, talijo se naši vsi ledeni pokrovi, tako morski ledeni pokrov, ki se tali okrog Antarktike in na Arktiki, in pa kopni ledeni pokrovi. Ogromne ledene gmote Grenlandije in Antarktike se talijo in ta led prispeva tudi, to je drugi prispevek k dvigu morske gladine. Velik del severne poloble je pa tudi pod stalno zmrznjena. Rečemo, da je poseben izraz je, ne, permafrost in tudi ta se tali. Velik del Kanade, Sibirije, ne, je bil včasih okolje, kjer so zrasla celo mesta na trdnih tleh, ne. Sedaj se to tali in naenkrat je ogromno, lahko rečemo, tudi ekosistemov, ne samo ljudi, ne samo ljudi v mestih, brez svojega življenjskega okolja. Drugi problem taljenja permafrosta je pa, da se zaradi taljenja sprošča metan, ki je spodaj. Metan je pa tudi toplogredni plin, ne, ni samo ogljikov dioksid, toplogredni plin, in s taljenjem permafrosta se ogromno dodatnega metana sprošča v ozračje in dodatno prispeva k podnebnim spremembam, ne. Imamo nek začaran krog na ta račun. No, če se pa zdaj malo bolj fokusiramo na naše kraje, na Slovenijo, ne, podobno kot v svetu, tudi v Sloveniji raste temperatura in celo bolj hitro. Ta hitrost, posebej v zadnjih 40 letih, je, lahko rečemo, še enkrat večja kot globalna, ne. Smo v takem delu Zemlje, kjer se segreva malo hitreje, ne. In se bo tudi v prihodnost, ne glede na to, kaj bomo naredili s toplogrednimi plini, edino, kam bomo prišli, je razlika, ne. In ena najhujših posledic, s katerimi se bomo morali v Sloveniji soočiti, so sigurno vročinski valovi, ne. Te so že bolj pogosti, da dlje časa trajajo in pri višjih temperaturah se dogajajo. Kar je pa najbolj zaskrbljujoče, je pa, da se bo ta trend še zelo stopnjeval, ne, v prihodnosti. Po najslabšem scenariju, na primer, ne, 30 stopinj Celzija je neka fiziološka meja za živa bitja v našem podnebju, ki že predstavlja vročinski stres, ne samo za ljudi, tudi za ostale živa bitja, ne. In takim dnevom rečemo vroči dnevi, ne. In po najhujšem scenariju nas konec stoletja v Ljubljani recimo čaka v povprečju 90 takih dni. Ampak to ne bodo dnevi samo s 30 stopinjami, ampak bistveno več. Si lahko predstavljamo, to je 1/4 leta, ko bo zelo, zelo vroče. Lažje je to seveda predstavljati ne danes, ampak v kakšnem zelo vročem poletnem dnevu, ne, si lažje predstavljamo, ker ljudje zelo hitro pozabimo, kako je, ko je hudo, ne. In vročinski valovi bodo zelo hud javnozdravstveni problem, ker vročina je tihi ubijalec. Pravzaprav zaradi vročine izgubimo bistveno več življenj kot s katerimkoli drugim naravno katastrofo. Samo počasi se dogaja in nismo tako pozorni. Te hude vročine bodo pa spremljale suše, ne. Temu smo že v zadnjih desetletjih kar priča, ne. Tam 60., 70. leta praktično nismo poznali suš, vsaj ne v tem velikem obsegu, samo lokalno so se pojavljale v Prekmurju in ob obali, ne. Danes pa poznamo suše, praktično ni leta, ko ne bi govorili o suši ali pa ko ne bi bilo naše kmetijstvo prizadeto zaradi suše. Mogoče tisti malo starejši se spomnite leta 2003, ko je bilo res zelo vroče in katastrofalna suša v Sloveniji. No, sredi stoletja, ne, če ne bomo naredili kaj res zelo drastičnega pri omejevanju izpustov toplogrednih plinov, bo praktično tako vsako poletje, ne. Pa še hujše bodo, no, po jakosti suš. No, potem pa, kot sem že prej rekla, padavine so zelo pomemben del, ne, podnebja, ker nam zagotavljajo vodo. Zdaj, Slovenija spada med zelo dobro namočene države. Lahko smo tega kar zelo veseli in taka bo ostala, k sreči. Ne. Zimske padavine se bodo namreč zelo povečale. Ampak po drugi strani se nam bo pa celoten cikel malo spremenil. Na račun povečanja zimskih padavin lahko pričakujemo pa zelo veliko pomanjkanje poletnih padavin. Ne. To je pa ravno nasprotno od tega, kar si želimo. Ker poleti naše življenje, naše rastline potrebujejo vodo, po zimi vsa voda odteče, ne, ni koristna. In še to je dejstvo, ne, ki je zelo pomembno, ko govorimo o padavinah, kako padejo, ne, na kakšen način. Počasne padavine so koristne, tiste z veliko jakostjo pa zelo hitro odtečejo. Ne. Slovenijo padavine zapustijo v povprečju v 1-2 dneh, ne, odteče tisto, kar pade. Zaskrbljujoče je pa še to, da se bodo že tiste padavine, ki že danes predstavljajo določen problem, ne, zelo močne padavine, obnovljivih, ko nam recimo v mestih zaliva podvoze in tako naprej, se bodo povečale še za več kot 30%. Ne. Se pravi, lahko pričakujemo še bistveno večje težave v ekstremnih padavinah. Pomemben del vodnega kroga je pa tudi snežna odeja. Snežno odejo mi zelo velikokrat povezujemo s smučarskim turizmom, z zimskim turizmom. Slovenija je smučarski narod, ne, ampak to ni tisto bistveno, kar nas skrbi pri snegu. Namreč sneg je izjemno pomemben naravni zadrževalnik vode. V času, ko jo rastline ne potrebujejo, zadrži, potem pa zelo počasi skozi poletje ali zgodnjo pomlad, poletje spušča, ne, da jo rastline lahko vso tisto vodo, ki jo sneg spusti, sproti pobirajo. Se pravi, ne odteče tako kot pri hudem padavinskem dogodku. Ne. In to je posebej pomembno za naše gozdove. Velik del, 2/3 Slovenije imamo pokrite z gozdovi in ti gozdovi so odvisni od vode v snegu, ne, in to mi izgubljamo. Zato nas lahko zelo skrbi. No, drug vidik izgubljanja snežne odeje pa vpliva tudi na nevarnost za poplave. Prej sem govorila o sušah. Suše se bodo dogajale poleti, ne, ker bo dolg razmik med posameznimi padavinskimi dogodki. Ko pa bodo padavine, tudi poleti, bodo pa bistveno bolj intenzivne kot danes in lahko pričakujemo potem po dolgi suši pa hudourniške poplave. Medtem ko pa po zimi, ne, že prej sem rekla, po zimi se nam bodo pa povečale zimske padavine, hkrati ne bodo ostale v snegu, tako kot danes, ne, bodo takoj odtekle in to bo pa zelo povečalo tveganje za zimske poplave. Ne. Obe hidrološki skrajnosti lahko pričakujemo, tako suše kot poplave. No, kaj lahko naredimo? Ne? Ja, čeprav je mogoče malo smešna tale karikatura, ne, se mi pa zdi, da zelo lepo predstavlja naš odnos do podnebja, ne, pa podnebnih sprememb. Ne. In jaz imam vedno občutek, da govorim o nekih grozotah. Ne. In tako kot tale zborček tukaj, ne, gleda tistole grozljivko v pečici, ne, to so podnebne spremembe tamle v pečici. In podnebna znanost zelo dobro ve, kaj se bo zgodilo. Se pravi, mi imamo ogromno znanja, ne, vemo, kaj nas čaka. Ne. Zdaj imamo pa 3 možnosti. Ali da takole nemo opazujemo, kaj se nam bo zgodilo, pa malo skomignemo, pa rečemo, saj to ni naša stvar. Potem imamo pa 2 bolj proaktivni možnosti. Ne. Prvič, da skušamo malo znižati tistole temperaturo v pečici, ne, da bomo lažje preživeli, pa da dobimo bolj trdo kožo, ne, da bomo preživeli. Se pravi, da dobimo trdo kožo, to pomeni, da se bomo morali prilagoditi na podnebne spremembe, da jo pa znižamo, to so pa ukrepi blaženja podnebnih sprememb. Zdaj, veliko lahko naredimo že na individualni ravni, ne. Samo zavedati se pa moramo, da so velike razlike med našimi ukrepi. Ne. Ugašanje luči ni več dovolj. Ne. Je treba kaj več tudi na osebni ravni narediti. Zavedati se moramo, da k podnebnim spremembam največ prispeva naša potrošnja. Ne. Za karkoli že potrebujemo v življenju, vedno gre energija. In energijo pa vedno seveda danes povezujemo z izpusti toplogrednih plinov, razen v redkih primerih, ko pride iz obnovljivih virov. Ne. Tako da se moramo vedno nekako vprašati, koliko energije gre za to, se pravi, čim manj trošiti. Tukaj je približno predstavljeno, ne, razlika recimo med ugašanjem luči ali pa enim čezoceanskim poletom s letalom. Ne. No, ne pa samo na osebni ravni, ne, tudi kot družba moramo veliko narediti. Danes smo že slišali, se pravi, mi kot Slovenija smo zavezani evropskim ciljem, ne, sledimo evropskim ciljem, ki so kar precej ambiciozni. Najprej, na primer, je bilo do leta 2030 ne prvi cilj, da zmanjšamo izpuste za 40% in smo jih zelo hitro tudi popravili, zaradi tega, ker je bilo zelo hitro jasno, ne, da drugega cilja, da smo leta 2050 ogljično nevtralni, ne bomo dosegli s tem, da do leta 2030 zmanjšamo samo za 40%. Moramo več, se pravi, stremimo k 55%. In to bo kar težko. Ne. Bo potrebno veliko napora, o tem smo danes tudi že slišali, ampak kot rečeno, ne smemo obupati, vsak korak šteje. S tem bi jaz zaključila. Hvala lepa.
Thank you very much, Ms. Doliner, for this educational talk. There are a lot of local and also global politicians that would show you different slides. And it's really nice to see that business community is taking a lead into an initiative with this zero net also, with the zero net Chapter Zero Slovenia. Thank you. So we continue now with the round table discussion. Please welcome Maja Berlič-Lotrič, CEO of Lotrič Meroslovje, Barbara Gorjub, CEO and founder of Baklus, Gregor Podbevšek, Chair of Slovenian Directors Association, Andreas Klingen, Deputy Chair of the Supervisory Board, NLB, and Tomaž Vuk, President of the Management Board of Salonit Anhovo. Please join us on stage, everybody, and the round table, and give them a round of applause, of course. And the round table will be moderated by Mojca Markizetti.
Yep. They always say to me, Mojca, you're too serious, you need to smile when you're on a stage. But it's a bit difficult now to smile after everything that we've heard. Even so, I'm for more than 20 years dealing with these issues, and it's my day-to-day work talking about those facts and everything. Mojca, thank you very much, Mrs. Doliner, for your presentation. Dear guests, thank you for being here with us. We, the founding committee of the Chapter Zero Slovenia, are really thankful for your willingness and integrity to participate at this panel, where we have questions to which none of us has all the answers. Yeah, so it's not something that we know. You know, we'll be discussing things that we don't know, things that we need to still learn, share among ourselves, support each other, and so on and so on. Yeah. Let's start with Mr. Podbevšek, because we've now heard all about the risks and so on. So, Mr. Podbevšek, what is your we have everything that we have, the Chapter Zero Slovenia, ESG, the regulatory framework that's coming, and so on and so on and so on. We have for two reasons. One is climate mitigation, and the second is climate adaptation. Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't start with climate mitigation. We were not proactive enough. We had to be in the shoes where we need to adapt to really start. Yeah. So how do you see, actually, what's your opinion? How do you see the climate risks for Slovenian companies?
Yeah, so as we've heard, this is always a hard topic. I mean, the boards, not only Slovenian boards, boards in general are not really very efficient or haven't been so far very efficient in dealing with this. And I think there's quite a few reasons for this. And we've heard about some of them from the previous presentations. But in essence, net zero goals have the same challenge that all ecological goals and even all ESG goals have. They're long-term goals that pose strategic risks, and humans are known to be very poor with dealing with remote risk. We all know the psychological experiments on children who cannot really evaluate a risk that is somewhere in the future. They just cannot really feel the pressing need that they feel if they see the thing right in front of them. And it's the same with adults. And we all know that our house is burning. We've heard it, but we've also heard that it's going to be worse in the future. We're preparing for droughts, for floods, for extreme storms, even maybe for collapse of agriculture, famine, collapse of society. Some of the potential outcomes are downright horrifying. But they're not here yet. And we don't want them to be here. And that's the role of all this legislation. And we've heard about the Slovenian farmers, which really upset me. I'm glad that the Madam President told them something. But for you to come to Ljubljana with your tractors and say we're not going to abide by ecological standards because they're bad for business, I mean, come on. Of all the things you can protest about, that's what you come to my house with. I mean, it's just stupid. But that's how people are. And another point is, we've heard some of the worst effects, or the earliest effects that we feel somewhere pretty far away. They're in Africa. Maldives is going to get flooded, and some little Polynesian islands. And we come to the same problem that's always present with antisocial behavior. Basically, the good of such behavior, the profit is all mine, but the price is collective. So basically, my house might be burning down, but it's somewhere down on the first floor, and there's still good money to be made by selling gasoline. And companies, by their nature, traditionally, we've established governance to kind of promote sociopathic behaviors, this competitive, my competitors are my enemies, and I need to do whatever I have to do to get ahead. Logic is still quite prevalent in managerial doctrine, even in the know-how, in the schools that teach management. And this we really need to address, because this will come here and it will be bad. And then we have the last thing that I should point out. Boards are the only bosses that the managers have. And we have this aversion of sharing your worries with the board. No manager is going to come to the board. Imagine talking to your boss and saying, the first thing you tell him, I don't know whether I'm motivated enough. I don't know whether I can do this. This worries me. That worries me. You don't do that. You have, all people have this motivation to appear good in front of your superiors. And managers try to appear better than they are, and they try to show the company better than it is to the board members, to the non-executives. So when you combine all of this, as I said in the intro, we haven't done enough in Slovenia. I don't think we've done enough in Europe. We certainly haven't done enough globally, and it's not an easy thing to move forward.
Thank you. Well, personally, I think that we are really too much neglecting the already existing climate risks, and really not thinking they're in front of our nose, though we know they are. Yeah, Maja Prelich-Lotric, you're a CEO of Lotric Metrology, and you're at the same time a representative of a younger generation. And we're really happy to have you here. And I would like to ask you, how do you see climate risks and how do you integrate it in your corporation and in your governance even more?
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me. I mean, at the beginning, I'm still very honored to be here and to have this opportunity. So yes, I am second generation in the family business. I'm also 30 years old. So why am I standing here or sitting here? It's also a question that I had to deal with. Firstly, I personally addressed the topic of sustainability with Professor Dr. Adriana Reitz-Buchovac almost, I think, 7 years ago, when we started to transform the sustainability strategy in our company. But why am I here is because the company was handed to me a few months ago. So I'm the second generation, and I already said this at another event, and I'll say it again. In 30 years, I would like to give this to our third generation. I think this is the biggest and the largest sustainability goal that I personally have. By then, of course, our company will have to be neutral, but not only by emissions that we produce, but also with digital footprint that we will have. Not everything will be solved like with one single step or one single way. So I look at this very holistically. And personally, I don't like pointing fingers unless I'm pointing it to myself. I'm not a farmer, but I do have a garden. And yes, I don't have, when I will plant the seeds this month, I will not have any expectations. If it will grow, right? But farmers, they do have expectations, and a big one. And they need help, right? As much as I needed help from Professor Adriana at the beginning, I needed some guidance, and I needed to understand what impacts my business. Of course, personally, I do have goals to maximize, profit in our company. But I realized I have to do it in a different way. I realized, let's say planning, if I will be too long, or just please stop me. But I realized we are making biggest footprint in the way we travel to our clients. So basically what we did was, okay, let's start with finding a computer model that will help us to plan the routes much better. So the first month went by and we saved 1.5% of kilometers and the same amount of time. If we put this in perspective, we needed to invest 100,000 euros in this project, and it saved me 600 euros. So you question yourself, you question in your own choices and decisions. And that's why I need the government to help me to get through this transition. I know it will get better. I know we can maximize this, but the farmers, I'm sorry, but companies, we need help. And yes, we need to do this more.
Thank you, Maya, and thank you for putting out the perspective that it's really one journey for all of us, for all the stakeholders of the economy, of the policymakers, the society, the academia, everybody. And the only way we will be successful in this journey is if we work together. This is also one of the reasons why we established Chapter Zero Slovenia. Mr. Tomaševuk, you are also president of the management board, but of another type of a company, of Salonit Anhovo, of a company who is, let's say, a heavy emission company and has a lot to do. And you started a lot of really great sustainability projects with your integrity, with your team. My question to you is, are you getting support from supervisory board? What would you wish to get from supervisory board? Yeah. What knowledge do you need? What knowledge do you need on the level of the board to easily or more easier, yeah, start with the change?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and good morning to everybody. Maybe I will start with a little bit of context. Yes, we are a producer of cement, and cement is, let's say, the basic glue in concrete, which is worldwide.
We all need it very
yeah,
much.
And it's worldwide. Let's say it's used more than all the other construction materials together, and this dominance was achieved in, let's say, 150 years, not more. So it's the youngest of the construction materials. And this has happened because of the obvious advantages that this material has. So it's very local. It's stone, usually we don't drive more than 50 kilometers. And also the cement is produced, it's being produced all over the globe, everywhere practically is possible. And also embedded energy in a, let's say, construction piece is the lowest possible compared to other materials. So if we change this to other materials, we will only make things worse. So, but as a consequence of this volume, we are representing a sizable amount of carbon emissions. And therefore, it's really our responsibility to offer the product that is much better in this respect. So as a company, we have a goal to be carbon neutral in 15 years. And it's a very challenging, let's say, task or goal. We did some work already over the past 20 years. So nowadays we have around 10% lower footprint of our products compared to European average. So we know that for years or for decades in the company, we have this, let's say, awareness that we need to move, that we need to change this business. And therefore, also in this, let's say, in the communication to supervisory board and to owners, it's not that difficult, like maybe sometimes we were hearing also during today. So we all are aware that we need to change, and we even think that this, let's say, transformation of the society can be an opportunity for businesses to offer new things, better things, and to get some competitive advantage, if we talk in this strictly business language. But then again, of course, it's not that easy. Because we have some, let's say, business context, so business environment, that have certain expectations, certain limitations. And I think if we want to move faster as a society, we will need to face that, these obstacles and these challenges that we are facing in this path of the transformation. I will just tell you one example. Last year we started to produce a new type of cement, which is significantly, let's say, lower in the carbon footprint. I've been working in my PhD thesis on the chemistry of this 20 years ago. And then only recently the standards in Europe allowed this type of cement. So we were waiting, although we had all the knowledge, all the resources, for standardization. And let's say in this perspective of the next steps that we need to do, we also see a lot of challenges in, let's say, legislation, in the, let's say, understanding of the society, what steps are needed. And we know that we don't have the same, we all want to have, let's say, climate crisis solved. But then when it comes to the steps, how to do that, we already have different pictures. So I think we will need in the companies and also in the society do a lot more to put all these, let's say, pictures together and decide for certain action plan. Even if we know already now that most likely we will do some mistakes over this path, but we need to accept that. And therefore, also in the company, in the boardroom, it's very important that you build this spirit of trust among the people that are governing the company, and awareness that we need to move and that we don't know what are the exact steps to be done in the future.
Thank you very much. True. We do have the technologies, many of the technologies to move forward, and we are lacking support in terms of how we can implement that. We've talked about many companies about those ideas. Barbara Gurjuk, in the last 10 years, you were a member of many supervisory boards and a member of also many auditing committees. And you have a lot of experiences in that regard. So what would you, as a member of supervisory board or auditing committee, be questioning the management board, the managing directors, on the issue of climate issues, in the context of climate issues?
Thank you for your question. I would divide the questions for boards of directors into 4 main groups related to governance, risk management, strategy, as well as metrics and targets. First, I would wonder who was responsible for climate change adaptation and mitigation at the board level, because the attitude from company leaders is the most important in this aspect. I would ask if the company has hired a sustainability manager and formed a specific climate committee. Related to that, I would ask the boards how they intend to strengthen the awareness and skills of their employees to recognize and address climate-related matters. Secondly, it is very important to understand how the board ensures that material climate-related risks and opportunities are identified, mitigated, managed and monitored on a company-wide level. Oversight of climate risks and opportunities starts with a climate-competent board. Therefore, some strategic decision-making should be based on a holistic climate strategy with analysis with different scenarios. So asking if and how relevant climate considerations are incorporated in their strategic planning, business models, and financial planning is also an important question. And finally, it is also important how the companies measure the efficiency of their climate adaptation and climate mitigation. Therefore, we need some specific climate key performance indicators, targets, and goals which can be measured. Questions of when and which climate-related information must or should be disclosed by the companies follow here.
Thank you. Mr. Andreas Klingen, you're the Deputy Chair of the Supervisory Board of NLB. Yeah? So NLB is among most active companies in Slovenia in terms of net zero, not only financial institutions. How does Supervisory Board support that? What is your role? How do you see it? How are you challenging boards of directors?
Well, I hope I can be heard. We have a pretty cognitive, diverse board, I dare to say, and in that, Micha knows that from the past. In that, we have a very lively debate on the board, and also, I dare to say, this is a debate that has been raging on for a couple of years on the board of NLB in quite some intensity. Now, what have we done in the past? I think I dare to say we were not too bad in our CSR reporting. In hindsight, kind of woefully short on the sustainability end. It looks a bit funny in hindsight if you say, yeah, on the agenda was a paperless office. That was a great thing at the time. In hindsight, maybe a bit short on that. We adopted very early on for ourselves an internal sustainability agenda. And we also, of course, signed up to the sustainability roadmap, to net zero, and so forth. But in that, I think a lot of the aspects have been already raised by my colleagues, and therefore with an eye on the clock, I've been kindly reminded to keep it short. I just want to focus on 2-3 elements here. On one, I think we established a very capable team led by Alenka. We have been able to implement there quite a sustainability agenda, and we are monitoring the progress to the sustainability roadmap, and that is quite important to us. Risk management and all the other stuff has been mentioned already. I want to point out one specific item that is very important to us, and which actually places, I think, the biggest challenge for supervisory boards, and that is, it's a very fashionable buzzword, but that is data. If you are claiming to make that progress, and if you want to monitor that progress, you need to be able to prove it. You want to avoid that someone is coming to you from anywhere on this planet and telling you you are actually, Klingen and your team, you're greenwashing what you're doing. And actually, for a bigger organization like us, we are, as you know, we are active between Kopa and Kosovo, in that it is not that easy to prove, what you claim you're doing in hard facts. We have, kindly here, some representatives of the audit profession. They will come to you and say, hey, Andreas, we don't believe what you're doing there. Prove it to us. And then it becomes, in a bigger organization, it becomes a technology question. And thankfully, we have also David here as the head of our audit committee. It takes a grinding work to get to the bone of the data and to prove that. You don't want to be told, again, you are claiming the wrong the wrong facts here. So in that, and lastly, what we can do, and I skipped some of the items that I wanted to talk about, is as a part of the supervisory board, you're also ambassadors. You need to bring the message throughout the company. So it is high on our agenda to foster that dialogue in the organization, bring that message across, and once in a while it also doesn't hurt if you actually up there in the supervisory board, you start listening to your employees. They may have actually quite good ideas on how to improve very practically in a way that makes an impact. But my key message for a bigger organization here is you need to be able to prove it. You need to have the technology. You need to have the data. Otherwise, you will not be credible in the eyes of the investors, in the eyes of the society, in the eyes of all stakeholders.
Thank you very much. And being mindful of the time, we will cut this roundtable a bit shorter. I apologize. And I will ask you, all of you, the same question for the end. And I ask for a short answer. And that is, what is your number one personal professional goal to contribute to net zero, to climate zero, and so on and so on? So personal professional, it doesn't mean you're in your personal life. It means that it's not in your KPIs of the organization, but it's your personal goal in your professional life that you're going to push forward and achieve. And let's start from that side. Barbara.
Okay, thank you. In my professional capacity, I would like to take the initiative to implement sustainable practices such as reducing waste, promoting recycling, and promoting responsible resource management. By setting these goals, we can make a significant change towards creating a better future for the next generations.
Thank you, Barbara.
It will not as short as Barbara's. I apologize for that, because I want to make one comment here. We had this very helpful temperature chart earlier, and if I was a professor, I would now test if you had looked at it in that detail. and you could remember that. Do you remember when the kick-in of the global temperature change started roundabout? Yeah, but you know, if you look at the global chart that we saw earlier, it was 1980. And you could see that kicking in, starting up there. Now, in Germany, and I'm a German national, in Germany in the 1980s, early 1980s, there was a very vicious debate on what was called assiduous rain. It was, yeah, everyone is nodding about it, right? It was looked at, you know, there was this debate about German angst, about the forests dying from assiduous rain, and they're all a bit crazy. The forests didn't die. Still, that debate made a very big impact on the society as such. And you know what? Frau von der Leyen's agenda was shaped also by that part of the debate and all of that. Now, if you remember, or if I got now my Yugoslav history right, 1980 was about the year when Marshal Tito died, right? Just to give you a time perspective on when that happened. So you can say also against that experience of the background is 40 years lost. You can say that. You know, what did you guys, you know, had this debate in the 1980s, so what have you done? So if I then project it back on me, I think the sense of urgency, that I think is so high on my personal agenda. There was lots of good insights, but what was the practical insight? What was the execution of it? So if I had say the two words that I would have is urgency and execution.
A lot of work for Alinka and the team. Great. Mr. Vuk.
Yeah, so I've been working over last years on designing these steps that are following to the climate neutral cement production. And now my personal agenda is to develop a team that will be able to execute these actions. And only to refer to the colleague before, it's I also think that we need to understand this urgency, and we need to speed up, not as an individual company or individual, but as a society, because if we don't collaborate on this, we will not succeed.
Thank you. Mrs. Brelich-Lotrich.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, my personal and professional life is like, thank you. Yeah, it's everything is connected. So, you know, my long time goal, like the transition to the third generation. But to look more into daily life, I would like to have more knowledge and more the team, like already discussed, to have these competences that we can work with. We need to have more data we can work on, and how to say, like you said, to work together. In our case, it's working with the competition, actually. And this is something that someone can be afraid of, but why? You know what your core business is. You know what your advantages are. Why not connecting with others and actually perform much better on a larger scale? So that's it.
Thank you, Maya. This is definitely one trend. Competition changes to cooperation. Yes. Mr. Podbevšek, as a chair of the Slovenian Directors Association, what would be your personal professional goal to support the change that we need?
Yeah, to use the association to help promote an environment where responsible business practices will be rewarded and irresponsible business practices will be penalized, because we will need that as well. So that, yeah.
It is on the table. This debate is on the table, and it's provoking quite some debates. We can open that debate some other time. But today, unfortunately, we ran out of time. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. This is just the first panel discussion of Chapter Zero Slovenia. Really the first. Many will follow. You were the starters. Thank you.
Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you, Mojca. It is personally inspiring to see all the business leaders with such sense of urgency and so passionately talking about changing business environment and business practices and being responsible and have responsible business practices with younger, older business leaders, all genders. So I hope you all received valuable lessons today, insights on how to integrate this climate change into your decision-making process. We invite you to continue this quote-unquote fight for the climate. Important work by becoming a member of Chapter Zero Slovenia. Please take a moment and take your leaflets that were on your seats, and you can become a member of Chapter Zero Slovenia. It's very easy. You just scan this QR code, and it's free, and it's lots of valuable insights and great information. We would like to extend thanks to the founding members of Chapter Zero Slovenia, our keynote speakers, our panelists, and everybody for valuable contribution, and of course our sponsors today, NLB, Triglav, BTC, Go Green, and Delo. Chapter Zero Slovenia is looking forward to working with you in building a sustainable future. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for participating and support of Chapter Zero Slovenia. Thank you very much.
Dogodek, kot je bil današnji, je dejansko pokazatelj, kako nujno je ukrepanje na področju podnebnih sprememb. Zavedamo se vsi govorci, vsi udeleženci, da je ukrepanje nujno, da to, kar delamo trenutno, da je enostavno premalo. Omenjeno je bilo tudi, kako drago nas bo stalo v prihodnosti, ne samo z vidika podjetništva, ampak tudi človeštva, če z praksami, kot sedaj, nadaljujemo. In mogoče kot prispodoba, ki sem jo slišala pred časom in se mi je res vtisnila v spomin, primer zdravnika. Vsi vemo, da nekako moramo iti k zobozdravniku, vemo tudi, da bomo mogli za to nekaj plačati, vsekakor pa bo situacija še hujša, če gremo, ko nas nekaj že boli. In danes je situacija že taka, da dejansko je ukrepanje nujno potrebno. Tega se zavedamo na Ministrstvu za okolje, podnebje in energijo in z novo nastalim direktoratom za podnebne spremembe aktivno delamo na predlogu podnebnega zakona. Pripravljamo tudi nacionalno energetski podnebni načrt in obenem revidiramo program Sklada za podnebne spremembe, ki bo med drugim tudi pomagal gospodarstvu, podjetjem v prehodu v zeleno tranzicijo.